Hey guys, I wanted to go over a drafting tip video. So I've done this every year, and drafting, while it hasn't changed too much since Storm League started, which was my last drafting video, I still wanted to explain a little bit more and also just do a little bit more in depth of what you should be looking for in a draft. I also kind of did that specifically for Storm League, and in this video I want to talk a little bit more about Storm League and competitive when you're approaching draft. So I'll mention both of those in each of the 4 sections that I'm going to break this video down into. The first piece is the ban phase. The second piece is first pick. Third piece is going to be the trio, and I know that's going to sound kind of weird. And then your last pick is going to be the last section in there. So let's look a little bit about what a draft phase looks like. So how a draft phase works is on the top, you're going to have 2 bans for each team. These bans, you can ban whatever you want to ban. But normally what you should be looking for in a ban phase is if you're in competitive, you should be already knowing what map it is and what you're trying to accomplish. You should have already researched the opposing team as well, because a lot of teams have players that are so good at a specific hero that even if you counter that hero, they've played that hero so much that they know how to deal with the counter of that hero. So it's generally easier to just ban that hero, and we saw that working really well with a lot of the teams in competitive, where they'll simply just ban some of the best heroes of the opposing team. So I wanted to share that as the first most important thing that you want to be doing in the ban phase, especially if you're in competitive. The next thing is you want to ban counters to whatever team comp you're trying to run. If you're on a specific map, you should already know what team comp you want to run, and you should go, okay, well, if we're going to run this team comp, this is what counters it. For example, I talked about the training wheels comp, I've talked about blow up comps, I've talked about sustain comps. Let's say you're running a blow up composition on a map like Tomb of the Spider Queen. What's going to counter a blow up composition is a Medivh. Medivh puts a shield, you try to blow up a target, can't blow them up because of that shield. So you may want to look at banning a Medivh. But you also want to look at all the other aspects of it too. Now, if you don't know what team comp you're running just yet, and you kind of want to see how everything's playing out, you still want to look for a general team comp, something that has the pieces that you need. And then you'll just want to ban what's ever popular, what's ever strong at the time. What I'm going to say is, and I think I've mentioned this before, I don't really want this video to be outdated the second that I bring it out, which is why I'm going to give you guys a simple tool to determine how to ban something that's popular in your rank. So, for example, you can go to Heroes of the Storm, or so you go to HotS logs. And in HotS logs, you'll go to Statistics, you'll go to Hero and Map Statistics, and then in here, what you're going to do is you are going to look for your league, but you can also go 1 down and 1 above. So let's say you're in gold. You can do Plat, Gold, Silver. You can click Games Banned, and you can find the most popular bans in these ranks. Generally, the most popular ban is going to be the thing that allows you the highest win rate, just because it keeps everyone with high morale on board. But at the same time, what I mean by that is, let's say Kael'thas is normally banned in this rank. If you don't ban Kael'thas, even though his win rate's rather low in this rank, you don't really want to have to deal with the morale of your team, where they think that you're incompetent because you banned the wrong things. So generally just banning the top 4 things anyways is pretty safe, and you won't get in trouble for doing something like that. But another thing that I want to point out about this is, if you really want to bump up your win rate a little bit more, you could leave some of these open, but I also get concerned because I found that every time I leave Kael'thas open when playing on my Smurf, someone on my team picks Kael'thas because they don't want the enemy team to get it, and they don't even play a good Kael'thas. So sometimes just banning the top 4, even if their win rates are low, is one of the easiest things to do, and one of the things you might actually want to do in your ban phase. So to explain, the things that you should be looking for in your ban phase: if you're playing alone, you want to ban whatever's overpowered. You want to then ban whatever's strong in the meta right now, or in your meta. If you're in lower ranks, what's strong in your meta might be different from other metas. For example, in Platinum, Gold, and Silver, if I sort by win percentage, you might see some things in this win percentage that are different from the highest ranks. Let's say I sort by just Masters, and let's see how many of these change. Well, the Lost Vikings disappeared. Oh, hold on. Yeah, I'm still sorting by win percentage. Lost Vikings disappeared. Gazlo dropped down. Some other heroes rose since then, so you can kind of see how things move around a little bit. So find what's popular in your meta, find what has a high win rate in your meta, and find what you don't want to deal with. You can also ask your team for recommendations if you're not really sure, because the metas do shift, and searching by HotS logs alone probably won't be the perfect answer. So number 1, ban what's strong. Number 2, target ban. If the opposing team has a player that you recognize plays something and they're really good at something, that's where you'll want to target ban. If you ever look at someone and they play the majority of one hero and they've got a 65% win rate with that hero, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle if they get that hero. You're naturally going to have a lower win rate if you play against someone who one-tricks a hero and they get that hero. So banning that's important. It's also important when you're playing in competitive because you should be doing research on these teams. And finally, I mentioned banning counters. So with all of that, what is the next thing that you should be looking for in this game? Okay, the next thing is going to be first pick. If you are on blue team, if you ban first, that means you're also going to pick first. You're in a very unique situation because you will have first pick. So with first pick, you should be looking to do one major thing. That major thing is to look at whatever the strongest thing in the meta is, or the strongest thing on that map is, and think about, does that help your comp, or does that hurt the opposing team's comp? Because it could be used, and a lot of times, first pick is used as a third ban. I don't recommend that. I recommend having, I always tell people, you should be looking at trying to win the game first. And then you should be looking at countering the opposing team second. And that's why a lot of the bans that I even recommend are banning counters to your win condition. Because if your team is going to win, and we've seen this in HGC, the team that wins is generally the team that drafted to win, not the team to counter. And this is one of the biggest issues about dealing with some of the Korean teams, is the Korean teams would do these wild drafts and everyone would be constantly trying to counter them, and they wouldn't ever have an actual win condition. Where the Korean teams would just draft what wins, what is their method to win. So this is why I would rather have your first pick be a contested pick, something that's strong in the meta that your team needs, that most likely the opposing team needs. And the contested picks usually are the most popular heroes in the meta. So if I was to sort by all leagues, and I was to click popularity, currently the most contested pick right now is Tassadar, with Mei being the third most contested pick. Now Mei's also sitting at a 55% win rate, Cassia, 58% win rate, Joanna, 50% win rate, highly contested. So what you would be looking for, and what I'd be looking for that first pick, is to take a highly popular hero with a high win rate. So the first pick currently in the meta, now remember, this is going to be different. This is going to get outdated so quickly. But the first thing currently that I would be looking for is to grab Mei or Cassia if they're not banned. If those are banned, I would look for other popular picks that have high win rates like Zul. I would be looking for Rhaegar. I would be looking for maybe Tassar. He's only at a 51, but you kind of get the idea of what I'm looking for. High popularity, high win rate. The highest win percentage probably won't even actually be that high of a popular hero. In this case, it's Cassie, which she's very strong right now, so you should just be looking for that. But let's look at Rexar. His popularity is low. You don't really want to pick him into every game because his popularity is low because he's only picked into the situation that he's best in, which makes his win percentage a little bit inflated. And so you want to avoid that. You want to look for popularity and the highest win rates in the top 10 popularity. From there, that's really going to be your initial thing that you're going to be looking for in Storm League anyways. In the competitive scene, there might be some popular heroes with low win percentages just because they're difficult. Garrosh might be a little bit more difficult to get a lot of value out of. And there might be some higher win rates that are just easier to play, so you want to avoid those. You also want to be looking at your particular ranks as well, because what works in your particular ranks in Storm League might not work in other ranks, and what might work in your rank might be a little different in competitive, or it might be the same in competitive. Let's say you're in a division where the average rank is Platinum. People are likely used to playing against things that are popular in Platinum, and they're used to practicing things that are good in Platinum, which means that if your competitive team is around Platinum, you should also look at that as well. The next thing is the trio. Now, the trio is going to be a little hard to explain, But the trio is going to be essentially the next 3 picks. So if you're on this team, you're going to be looking at this, and on this team, or I'll use orange for red team. This is kind of your trio. Yes, you get to pick these in a group of 4. So we'll still call it there. Blue team, you'll be picking these. But the trio is really based on these 3 middle picks, okay? These 3 middle picks right here are extremely important because in these picks, you need to be able to solve several problems on your team. And that's where this is going to come in, which is my little list for... And I have to add one thing really quick. This is my little list, and let me zoom this in a little bit so it's easier for everyone to see. Every team needs these things, okay? Every team. Now on 2-lane maps, this becomes less important. On maps with not a lot of cams, this becomes less important. But at the end of the day, and if anything, I'll put these italicized so you know that they're not always needed. At the end of the day, every single team needs burst damage, sustain damage, a healer, a tank, engage, and follow-up. That's it. Every single team needs that. Now, if you're on a 3-lane map, wave clear is absolutely necessary. And if you're on a map with a lot of camps, camp clear is absolutely necessary. So all of those things are needed in that trio. Now, a lot of heroes can fit a lot of these things. For example, if you draft a gray main, I will just put a G here. Let me do this with the paint just so it's a little bit easier. Let's say you draft a gray main. Gray main is going to cover the sustain damage. He's going to cover the camp clear, the wave clear. And so now, he already covered 3 of these. Let's say you have a tank now and you pick, let's say you pick Joanna. Well, Joanna's going to cover the tank. She can also cover the engage. And let's say finally you need a mage that does a lot of burst damage. You pick like Orphea, right? Well, Orphea can then cover the burst damage as well as the follow-up. Follow-up could also be several things as well. Let's say you're playing a healer like a Tyrande or a Deckard. You can cover the healer, and then you can also cover the follow-up, right? Because what's happening is, I've talked about this on a lot of team comps, but team comps generally want an engage or a setup, and then a follow-up. One person sets up the enemy team to where they're all in a position where your entire team can follow up that setup. Maybe a big stun, an entomb, anything like that. Then your healer or someone will follow up with something to lock them down further. The follow-up is usually an ability that's hard to land on its own. So Deckard's Root, for example, it takes too long, everyone walks out of it. But a setup can allow Deckard's Root to always land. Well, then if Deckard's Root lands, that gives a huge amount of time that people are stuck in place. So you should be looking for those things. Well, if you look at this really quick, these are 3 people, right? We have 1, 2, 3, right? Well, we've got blue, green, yellow, orange. So this is 4. But let's say, for example, we missed out on one of those things. Or maybe one of them could cover multiple areas. But you could cover the majority of these needs in 3 people. I generally recommend a tank, a healer, and then 1 person will cover the majority. The last person will fill in whatever else you're missing. So let's say that you're choosing only 3. And I'm just going to use, for example, the blow-up comp. Okay, the blow-up comp or the training wheels comp that in this case, let's say training wheels, that's a Tonvarian, that's a Jaina, and that's a Tyrande. What's going to happen is this. Tonvarian is going to bring the tank as well as the engage, and he also has burst damage connected to him, so you can cover that. Then you're going to have the follow-up, which is Tyrande. We'll use green for Tyrande. She's a healer. She also has follow-up, and she also increases the burst damage that you're going to have because you add an extra stun, which does a lot of damage, then you decrease their armor so that they're going to take more damage. As far as Jaina is going to add the camp clear, the wave clear, and even more burst damage, right? She has light sustain damage, but we're not going to really count that too much. And that's your 3. You cover the majority of this, and that's the trio. And you can use this with a bunch of different trios as well. Let's say, for example, you want to run Joanna, Cassia, and Malfurion, right? Malfurion is the healer. We'll have the follow-up as well because you have a root. And that's it. That's all Malfurion's really going to be able to do. Cassia will be able to cover, let's go to the tank again. The tank can cover the tank, the engage, and that's about it for the tank. Also, Joanna has wave clear, so you've got your wave clear. We've got Cassia. Cassia is going to be your 3rd. Well, Cassia has pretty good sustain damage, has okay camp clear. Follow-up, again, that's your healer, hopefully is going to do the follow-up for you. What you kind of lack is burst damage. She does have a bit of burst damage. Same with follow-up, a little bit of it. So again, your trio is going to cover the majority of these things that your team needs. The last 2 members of your team should be map-specific and counters. And that's where this map-specific comes in. If you're on Battlefield of Eternity, you're going to need Race. If you're on Infernal Shrines, you're going to need Objective Clear. If you're on Cursed Hollow or one of those maps where you might need to cover the, or poke to interrupt things, there's that. And then there's also one more that I'd like to add, which is purely siege damage. This isn't always necessary because the objective might just win for you, but siege damage is another one. Generally, if you have camp clear, you have siege damage. If you have wave clear, not so much, but you might. It depends on how you're achieving that. But if you have camp clear, you generally have siege damage. So these are all things that every team comp needs. So let's look at this a little bit and go, well, let's go back to the draft now that we know that we need to achieve that, and we need to be able to achieve that in the trio area. So first pick, you're going to be picking the contested pick. So let's say you're here or you're in one of these 2 areas. You're going to be picking the contested picks, the things that either team is going to want, the popular heroes, the ones with high win rates that fit in almost any team comp. Those are the times you want to pick those. Then in the trio areas, which is going to be right here, right here, right here, and it's also going to be kind of right here, and right here, you're going to be trying to pick your 3 things to fill out the majority of what your team needs to win. Okay, we're not looking for how to counter the enemy team yet. We are looking at what is going to win the game. What are the 3 things that allows your team to set up a winning team fight, to follow up a winning team fight, and to close out the game when you do win a winning team fight? You don't want to just draft things that seem good. That will win a lot of games, but you really want to be drafting things that win, especially in competitive. Now, in normal games, you want to be drafting because you only really control yourself. So outside of the ban phase and the pick phase, you want to pick the thing that covers the widest range of these things. Unless you just have a hero that you just win with more often than not. If you can fill in any role, you want to try to cover as much of this as possible. So let's say your tank picks like a Garrosh, and that means that you have no wave clear and camp clear from your tank. Let's say your assassin picks Nova, so you have limited camp clear and no wave clear. You're going to want to pick an assassin, and Nova's damage is all burst. You're going to want to pick an assassin that covers the sustain damage, the camp clear, the wave clear. So you're looking at like a Greymane, right? So you always want to try to fill in the extra damage here. There is also kind of a mini thing that you're going to be looking for, which is physical or spell damage. While they've removed, and this was something I was really like focusing on in my initial draft video, because all the tanks had either physical or spell armor. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. Honestly, as long as you have guaranteed damage on the targets you want to go for, you could go all spell damage. And I mean, they'll have a Nubarak or they'll have a couple things, but you'll probably still be okay. Double Mage isn't as bad as it used to be. There are a lot of downsides to it. The damage doesn't always go where you want it to go, because spells generally take a while. They can be dodged. The damage is usually more AoE than single target, so if they have an AoE healer, they can usually keep up. So you kind of want to still split your damage a little bit, but that's more for the competitive scene. As long as you cover the majority of these other things, you're fine. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. And then finally, let's get back to this draft. What we have now, after the trio that needs to cover almost everything in there. First pick, contested picks, trio, covering the rest of those things in there. The last pick, okay, this is the only time I recommend counter picking. So, if you are on a map like Dragonshire or Braxis, control of the top lane is huge. If your team never wins the top lane, you're just naturally going to have a very difficult time to win. Your win rate is going to drop by 20% if you can't hold the top lane. So, last picking to counter the opposing team's solo laner can be rather large. It could be a huge benefit for your team. Now, one team is going to get last pick, which is the second team to pick. So that gives them an advantage on that particular map. The other team has to choose it in the last two. And if they haven't picked their solo laner yet, you might want to pick something that, one, can deal with a wide range of solo laners, and two, maybe something that can join the solo lane to help them out a little bit if they get counterpicked. So while the first team to pick has an advantage in that they get first pick, the second team to pick has an advantage where they always get the best opportunity for a counter pick. So if you have the widest roster pool and the most draft knowledge, you can counter pick almost any team comp in that last pick. If someone's running a blow up comp, run Medivh. If Medivh's banned, you can run Ariel if you're still healing, because then Crystal Aegis can stop almost any blow up comp. The taunt goes off and all the other abilities get thrown out. Boom, they're locked in a Crystal Aegis. If you're not playing tank and you want to counter a blow up comp, I mean, even Chen could work, because right as they go for the first ability, you barrel and knock everyone away. It's a low cooldown ability, and you could even knock a couple people into your team, so your team cleans up a few, and you also countered the engage at the same time. If people are running more sustained comps where they want these long, drawn-out fights, you can run something more bursty. You could run something that CCs more. You can run however you want to do it. If your team doesn't have an engage, you can do that. The last pick can also fill in if needed, because on a lot of maps, you don't need a counter in the solo lane. So your last pick could be just filling in whatever your team missed out on that chart. But you should try to get that in the trio if you can, and you want to leave that counter pick to the end. Whatever the enemy team comp is trying to do, most roles have answers in that last pick, but the solo lane actually has the most answers to almost anything. If I was to pull up Heroes of the Storm, and I was to go to the Bruiser role, heavy CC teams are countered by Deathwing as well as by Leoric. Leoric can pop E before all of the CC, could pop March before the CC, could set up on his terms. So, heavy CC teams, you could deal with Leoric or Deathwing. Let's say the enemy team is running the Lost Vikings, or they're running Abathur. Globals, when I played Abathur, globals were the most annoying thing to deal with, because you would benefit from staying in the opposite lane. But what would end up happening is they could stay in the opposite lane too, except for they could do way more than your locusts can do. And you can't safely soak the lane while they're there, because you have to walk up to get that soak. So, but you don't want to just leave your hat up top, because that's wasting Abathur's potential. So globals are the most infuriating thing to deal with, so you draft a global. They have a Lost Viking, same thing. Lost Vikings needs to go in that lane to soak. You kill the Lost Viking, then you go join your team, and now you ruin the best part about Lost Vikings, is that they can soak these side lanes during objectives. So you kill a side laner, you join the team, now you're fighting a 5v4, you win the 5v4, and you could go back and kill another Viking and another Viking on the way back. And it's like, globals are really, really powerful for that. So you can counter almost anything in the game in the solo lane if your roster pool is big enough and you understand what's going on. Let's say you want to get even a little bit sneakier, where the enemy team is they're going for a full wombo combo, right? Well, not only can Blaze counter that and also be in the solo lane by using Bunker, but also Tyrael can with Sanctification. I've learned recently that Tyrael has better wave clear than I thought. I was like, oh, Tyrael's wave clear is really bad. Then in my Judgment Tyrael video, I realized his wave clear is actually good enough to double soak. So Tyrael or Blaze can answer any of that in the solo lane. And so this is why last picking with a soul laner is the best if you can. Why I say if you can, well, if you're playing Bruiser and Urel's available and you have a Urel on your team that's an 80% win rate, you're going to want to take that before they can take it. Even if they can counter it with Malthael, your Urel at an 80% win rate probably knows how to deal with a Malthael. But it's the same thing. Last pick, if you're going against a Urel and you're a good Malthael, you know exactly how to take down a Urel. So all of these things are why you kind of want to last pick the soul lane if possible, but there are still a lot of times where if the soul laner pick is contested, like Rexar or Urel on Braxis, then you might want to pick them earlier than later, if you're actually good at them. And that's where I get to the last portion of draft, which is what I've said in all of my draft videos. You could play the same hero every single game and get to Grandmasters, and I can name a Grandmaster player for every single hero in the game that has done that. Every hero in the game is capable of getting 2 Grandmasters with a single hero. Drafting is one of those things that if you are playing a hero good enough, the draft almost doesn't matter that much. Now, in the competitive environment, you should have 5 people that are playing to their best, and with a lot of research, people might ban your one tricks, which is why drafting gets more important in the competitive scene than it does anywhere else. But it is something that you should still know in Storm League, because losing because you have a bad draft because you're missing a key piece feels really bad. And so if you're closing in on meeting all of the criteria, or you're playing something that meets all the criteria, or a lot of the criteria, then playing your best is always going to be playing better than something that you need, if you're going to play that thing that you need really poorly. Some things I would say definitely have more of a priority, though. If you're ever looking at this list and going, well, I said wave and camp clear aren't that important, and tank and healer are definitely important. Having an engage and a follow-up, you can certainly win without those things if you're just playing really well. Look at Chromie, for example. If Chromie just pokes a lot, you almost don't need an engage or a follow-up if you're on a point control map. If you're on Volskaya and you poke all the enemies away, who cares if you don't actually win a team fight? You win every single objective just because you're that good on Chromie. You can almost ignore a lot of the other pieces of the map. But healer and tank are things that are just absolutely necessary. So while you need those things, if you are bad at those, just say that in draft. Just go, I'm bad at those, but I would still like to fill. Or if you're someone who just wants to play one thing every single game, pick it early so there's no confusion. What bothers me, I mean, unless it's like something that gets really easy to get countered, then hover it early and explain to your team that you'd like to last pick it. Drafting can get way more complicated than this. There are so many little factors. This is the basics of drafting and everything from there. There's also a lot of psychological aspects to it. You can bait people into taking specific things that you're going to counter. One of the guys that I coached, he liked to play Alexstrasza. And I said, there's actually a way that you could win almost every game by first picking Alexstrasza. And he's like, well, I don't like to first pick Alexstrasza because then they pick Ana. And like, for me, if you play Alexstrasza correctly, you know how to play around the counters. But beyond that, I say, okay, well, if they always pick Ana, what can you always expect to happen? You throw out a W, she throws out a W, but during that time, she needs to walk close enough to throw out a W. And so I told him, I said, start running Tyrael and Ragnaros. And I said, Tyrael as your main tank with Judgment, and Ragnaros in the solo lane. And I said, when you reach team fights, make sure that Ragnaros is there. And I said, you just throw a W out in the middle of that team fight. She's going to walk up to grenade it. And then you're going to have Judgment Tyrael go in and Ragnaros do a Sulfurious Smash. And you will kill Ana every single time. So by using the psychology that everyone's going to pick Ana because you pick Alexstrasza, you can instantly kill an Ana every single team fight. And then the enemies have to fight without a healer. They ended up going with a 93% win rate among the tournament that they were in off of that 3-person combo. First picking Alexstrasza, which then used some psychology. They always would go against an Ana. They always would pick Tyrael, and they would always pick Ragnaros. To the point that people started banning Ragnaros and Tyrael, and they were wasting bans, which means the rest of the people on his team got to play their actual one tricks. And that's, you can use psychology in drafting as well. The drafting part of this can go on for 30 to 40 videos if I really wanted to get in there. But I wanted to show you guys everything you need to know about drafting, the 2020 guide of drafting, what you should be looking for, what you should be doing. So just to do a quick recap, the ban phase. Ban what's popular, ban what's strong, and honestly, just ban the top bans in your area so you don't tilt your team or force your team to play things that they aren't really that good at. First pick, you should be picking whatever's contested. Click the top popularity, and if you have a wide roster pool, grab the thing in that high popularity that has a high win rate. Right now, that's Cassia and May, and if you watch this video in a month, it's probably something different. But that's kind of the basic idea about that. The next thing is the trio. Your team should be able to set up a winning team within 3 picks. Almost any team comp in the game can be built within 3 picks. The last 2 picks aren't usually that necessary. If you're running a blow-up comp, all you need is a setup, a follow-up, and some burst damage. 3 people. If you're playing... like even with like the Diablo comps where they used to run Void Prison into APOC, they would run those 2 and then something to follow up that stun. That's all you need in a team comp. Now, I recommend more guaranteed options. What I mean by that is if you're going to do a setup, it needs to be more guaranteed. Entomb is pretty guaranteed. If you entomb someone who doesn't have an escape, they will be sitting there for the majority of that time. Mosh isn't actually that much of a guarantee. I don't like people building a comp around Mosh Pit because landing a perfect Mosh is likely going to lead to a team fight win even if you didn't plan a team comp around it. So instead, I try to recommend more guaranteed things. What's half the length of a Mosh Pit is Garrosh's Taunt. It's almost the same radius. I think it's a little smaller. But it's a 2-second lockdown. So what would be more guaranteed is making a combo off of that taunt. And that's what we saw in CCL, where taunt would lead into Sulfuris Smash. And so that's the thing. That's how you want to be looking at these team comps, if you can. With all of that being said, I don't want this video to get too long, and I just wanted to focus on all the major pieces that you wanted to look at in a draft from the start of the ban phase down to the bottom. Now, there's one thing that I missed out on, and I'm just going to make this quick because it still fits in all of the same areas. And that's, where's my crayons really quick? And that's this right here. Both of the teams get another ban. Now, what's going to happen before this ban is one team is going to already have picked... actually, both of the teams should have already have picked 3 things. Oh, wait, no. Hold on. One team has only picked 2, and one team has picked 3. You want to try to imagine what team comp they're going for, and you want to ban the piece away from them. Okay? That's number 1 about the second ban phase. Number 2 is where you wanted to ban what you actually wanted to ban, but you didn't want to ban it for psychological reasons. What I mean by that is, let's say you're trying to play Cho'Gall. If you ban Leoric, and you ban Tychus, and you ban Malthael, and you ban Greymane, you ban like any of those too early, they're going to ban Cho'Gall. Or they're going to pick the other ones. You ban Tychus, you ban Leoric, they're going to pick Greymane because they're just expecting it, right? So you can't show them too much, and that's where the last ban phase comes in. You don't want to show them too much. And that's where, honestly, we get back to the whole psychology and how there's so much more to drafting, because while to win more, you can follow these basic tips, but when you get into competitive, you don't want to show too much. If you're going to do a team comp that requires specific pieces, you don't want to show those pieces too early. That's why in CCL, when there was a Juice Pirates that was ran, and they did really well with it, they started off by picking Rhaegar first. That doesn't fit in Juice Pirates at all. And so people just let the whole draft go from that point on, and they didn't even think it was going to be Juice Pirates. If you guys don't know what Juice Pirates is, it's essentially a team comp that runs Morales and a few other key pieces, and they will use a ship to go straight to your keep, and they'll destroy your keep at level 10, because by the time it takes you guys to back and get to them, they've already destroyed the keep with 5 members. Then you kill them, and the next time that they're up, they're going to use that ship once again to get to your base. And same thing, you can wait at your base the whole time, but they're just going to be soaking all the lanes. Then when you start soaking all the lanes, they're going to group up together and fly to your base. You don't have the time to get there, and then they get there and they do a bunch of damage to your keep. It usually only takes about 3 ships to end the game. The cooldown of the ship a little bit more than a minute. So if you imagine, it takes about 4 to 5 minutes to lose the game after level 10 with Juice Pirates. They picked Rhaegar, which isn't generally used in Juice Pirates, and they did that so that they could get the enemy team to not think about that team comp. And the same thing, if you have a very specific team comp that you win with a lot, maybe pick something first that's not part of that team comp so the enemies go, oh, I didn't think about that. And that's the same thing with your bans. You can't show too much of your bans, and that's where this ban phase comes in. That's when you're supposed to do that. Either way, this video is getting very long, so I do want to close it out rather early. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully this draft video helps you out, gives you an idea of how to draft in this current meta, what you should be looking for, and how to draft in really any meta, what you should be looking for, and how that leads in competitive as well. Don't overthink your team comps either. I see too many people where they'll draft an entire team comp around landing a mosh pit, and like they'll never land the mosh pit, or they just draft way too many things into one wombo combo and they end up just getting it all canceled by like a bunker. So don't overcommit into anything either. 3 people is all that's necessary to make a combo work. And a winning team comp only really needs 3 people. You'll still have the rest of your team for those team fights, but they can do their own thing to make sure that you guys don't miss out on macro, because a lot of the combos that I see that are really powerful usually will lack in 1 or 2 areas, so you want to make sure that you fill in those extra areas. So, and also when devising a team comp that works, is Training Wheels is just that. Training Wheels is not a comp that I want everyone to be running. Training Wheels is a comp that's meant to teach people how to do correct shot calling. Varian goes in and taunts and tells the team who he's going to taunt so that everyone can get in range. Then he charges in, he taunts, then you stun, you lower armor, and Jaina can get 2 to 3 of her blizzard strikes off, as well as a cone of cold and a frostbolt. It's enough damage to kill anyone if your shot calling is good. So that's what it's meant to be. But running that team comp is pretty easy to counter. So it should be a tool to get you guys to practice. Now, can you sneak it out in a real game? Of course. In fact, it's very strong against Joanna. Joanna was used a lot, and one of the teams that I was coaching that used that team comp, the Training Wheels team comp, would let the enemies get Joanna on Tomb of the Spider Queen, and then by level 13, they would just attack Joanna until she used her shield. They would shield shatter it, taunt her, and kill Joanna every single time. And I'm like, this is still really good. So this is kind of what you want to look at. And a lot of times they would just run Greymane. They would curse Bullet first. She would shield because she's like, oh, half my health's gone. They're trying to kill me. She would shield. You'd shield shatter her shield, taunt her, and then Jaina would just blow her up. And that's the thing, is whatever team comp you run, you want to try to match all of those things that are in there. You want to play it out to get all the macro that's necessary, join up and have a solid team fight win. And then you also want to make sure that you've practiced it enough. Changing your team comps multiple times is the way that you're going to end up not knowing what a good team comp is, because you don't practice a team comp enough to see that it's good. One of the teams that I've been coaching, like, I coached them for a little while, and then I kind of stepped away for a bit, and I looked back, and they can't figure out what team comp they want to run. They'll try a team comp, they'll lose. They'll try a different team comp, they'll lose. They'll try a different... They went down like a full tier in rank, and just doing that. And I said, that's like looking at a new hero, playing them once, losing, and saying, this hero sucks, without knowing how to actually play that hero. So when you guys practice a team comp, you need to practice it several times to determine whether or not it's actually good or not. And then you get a feel for it and you go, okay, well, maybe this actually isn't that good. Or you start learning what the problems of that team comp are and you start adapting to it. So that being said, guys, I do want to close this video out here. Keep it up. Play your best heroes in Storm League. Don't just switch off to something that you don't play. Focus on your best, but if you do expand your roster pool and you're good on a wide variety, then you can look at this to start filling in what your team needs. I'll put the not the full document, I'll just copy and paste this into the description down below so you guys can see that. If I don't, then I'm sorry, because I'm doing that tomorrow, so if I forget, then I apologize. But yeah. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you have any extra tips about drafting, throw them down in the comments down below. Help each other out. We're all here to educate each other. And with that, and always keep it friendly. With that, thank you guys so much for watching, and feel free to check out my other videos.